Welcome back for part 4. And if you're new to the channel, jump back and check out the previous videos on this build where we prepped the drivetrain by camming the 5.3, rebuilding the 4L60E, shortened the frame for a short bed conversion, installed a 4-link rear, and a C4 Corvette front suspension. You're probably wondering what I got going on here. We did all this work and then take the cab off afterwards. Well, we got the front cleaned up all nice, the back end's all restored. We can't hardly leave this 4 feet of frame in the center all crusty and nasty looking. We got to clean that up and do something with it. And like we said in the last video, we're going to do a nice tube frame stiffener in here and get rid of all these old cross members. They're rusted and pitted real bad, especially where the 4-link mounts to back here. I mean, them brackets are just rusted wafer thin. I know you can't see it down in there because there's no light. But the first plan of operation here is getting this engine mounted. We're still sitting on our piece of lumber underneath there. As you can see, we got our brackets on there, a little test fit, make sure everything's going to clear. But the issue we got here is this is a Speedway LS swap mount kit for this truck if it had their Mustang 2 kit in it. But with this vet rack in here, this joint is maxed out and there's no way in hell those mounts are going to work. I thought about spacing them down, but I'm still going to run into it here, and yeah, we're going to go clean slate on this thing. Because I learned a long time ago trying to force the wrong idea, the wrong plan. Never works out in the long run, you just end up wasting time and energy. So, we're going to jump over to the computer, and we're going to design something that we know is going to fit versus buying something else that might not work. So my initial plan was to go buy some 5th gen Camaro motor mounts, 2010 and up. But these kick out kind of wide, and I don't think they would get inside the frame rail since those K-frames are so wide in those cars. So we turned to Fusion 360, where we've got a dimensionally accurate LS block here. And the first design iteration I made looked something like this. And this was just kind of just to get a visual, no real dimensions. It sticks out way too wide, way wider than what we need it. So after I drew this up quick, jumped back to the chassis and measured what we had for as far as clearance everywhere. And this is what we came up with. It'll give us plenty of clearance for our steering and room for some headers when that time comes. I also added a weld fixture here. I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but my 3D printer is just plugging away back there. That way I can bolt all these side plates to this plastic block just to get everything tacked up, keep everything true and square, because all these pieces, it's tough to keep them all parallel and straight. So we blew all our parts into a 2D drawing here so we could get our DXS file to send to Chad at Crooked Iron Fab. He's leaving to go on a big demo derby trip again, so he said he'd get them cut out right away in the morning for me before he leaves. Cutting her awful close there. Now how neat is that?
That's pretty neat.
Ready to tack together. Well, we got her tacked up, bolted on. Now looky here, we got all kinds of room for activities. Plenty of room for our steering. Got room to get a header in here maybe. The only thing I did biff on this whole deal is easier to show you on this side here. But I didn't account for the compression of these rubber mounts when you crank them down. I didn't think they squished down that much, but I lost about a 1/2 inch of height here, so I can get my level underneath there between the cross member. That's no big deal. We can put a little bend in here and bend the end of this down and then plate around it. So we're going to do that now. Who needs a press brake anyway? Well, I got the one side finished out and ready to burn on. That sits down there on the cross member and sits on the cross member like so. I figured I better do all my gusseting before I burn it in there so I don't have to work down in that hole. But what I did there is I just took a piece of 3-inch eighth wall. This was dry shaft tubing, new stuff. And just opened the ends up and flatten them out. Well, hey there, little buddy. What are you doing in here? He likes welding. Every time I fire up the welder, he comes flying over and sits down right next to me, like within 2 feet. Had to kill the tunes. Demonetized. I let him out, but I had the door open for 3 hours already, and the mosquitoes were coming in here so bad they're tearing me apart. So, and it's 2 in the morning, so he'll have to wait till tomorrow. Those babies welded out beautifully. Got the motor bolted back in, and I've gone ahead and started busting the rust on this frame. Just wire wheeling a 36 grit pad. I think I'm going to knock all these running board mounts off the battery box and the cab mounts, cut all those rivets and take that stuff off of there, because we're going to have all this looking good and got no way to get up inside them mounts, and it's really crusty up in there. So I think I'm going to cut everything off, get a clean frame, and then go ahead and cut out those cross members. And I'll bring you back when we're done with that. One side cleaned off. Now you can see here why we're doing this. There's nothing left of it. It's rotted right through. But I think you get the idea here. So I'm going to continue on and get that side all stripped off and get this frame cleaned up, and we'll bring you back after that. Ooh-wee. That wasn't even any fun. About 60 rivets later, we got this frame cleaned off. And I got her ground up with a 36 grit pad, the best I can without getting into the base metal. And after that, I hit her with the old OSFO rust converter, just like we did on the back of the frame here. And got her masked up. We're ready to top coat this thing. And for that, we're going again with the 3M 8883 rubberized. Well, it's been a couple days. Got that frame all recoated. And I stopped there because we're going to paint the front of the chassis, what you'll be able to see from looking in the engine bay. And I've got our plates made here to land our tube structure onto. Those started life as a piece of 2x6 box tubing that I sectioned. I kind of made just a big piece of angle out of it here, as you can see. This is a bolt-in affair. And I've made it so it captures all these existing bolt holes from those cross members, and also bridges across where our 4-link mounts, and this will also completely shore up where we splice the frame here. And as far as the front mounts, they're made the exact same way, wrapped around the bottom and then angle inside the frame. And I'm catching the cab mount there and here. Also sourced ourselves a drive shaft here. I believe that's out of a, I don't know, early 2000s Chevy Tahoe. But we needed to put that in there because, as you can see how far offset to the passenger side that drive shaft is. We don't want to get ourselves in trouble running out of real estate there when we put our tubing in there. So I'll shut up and quit mansplaining and get them pieces put in there, and I'll show you how that all goes in, just so you get the idea here. And then we'll jump over to Fusion 360 and show you the whole game plan. So here we are in Fusion 360, and this is the plan right here. See those green plates that we've got built already? And pay attention to these tubes that are sticking down below the frame here, because those are going to tie into the 4-link mounts and keep those things from twisting around, because they're not real stable as it is. So we'll fix that. And if we've got room later on, we might stick this here tube in there to try to brace that up even further. As you can see on the bottom, we're wrapped around the bottom of the frame. And I did this so that potentially if I had needed to get this thing out here for any reason, we could drop it out the bottom. We got our first bar tacked in there, the only straight one that goes across the frame. And got a piece of conduit clamped in here. So our first ones, we're going to start from here and come up to this side. We're going to do these top bars in the front first, and then do the top bars in the back. That way when we do our bottom bars, we can cut our pieces that go all in between and clamp that up tight to those, and it'll have to be flat. We've got our first piece of tubing loaded up in the bender here, ready to go, so let's get after it. we had a few errors on these two pieces. Let's talk about it. First of all, I completely biffed this angle here. I don't know what happened. Something to do with taking it out of fusion. It's hard to tell your tubing rotations where you have to rotate the tube in the bender. And the angle was way wrong. So I revisited that and got it right on that one. But we recovered from it. Got it sleeved with a piece of 1.5-inch tube in here. I didn't want to waste all this tubing. And I didn't have to get another stick down from up in the loft there. So we're sleeved here. I think there's a 5-inch piece in there. And left the gap, the thickness of the tubing, which is 1/8 inch. And then we'll plug weld back in as well. And I'll get to use my new toy. Just picked up one of these pipe sander / polishers, so we should be able to erase those welds like they're not even there after we get that all filled in. We've got enough gap that we can grind it off flush and it will still be full strength. Also overbent this tubing just a little bit. I've got a perfect 90 on this one, but I've got the slightest gap against this flat bar here. And I'll show you how to fix that, because actually this one was overbent too and I already fixed it. But we need to go outside and find an immovable object. That was probably too much. Way too much. That looks pretty stinking good right there. I like it. So these threaded inserts we made on the lathe here, these go into the end of the tube here. And these 4-link brackets, they've got a sleeved 5/8 hole in the center just as a brace. We're going to take a 5/8 bolt and stick through there. And then put a stack of washers between this and this. When this gets welded on, like we've got over here. But that's going to enable us to weld that on and then have a gap in there, and I can just shim between and push this in or out with shim washers instead of trying to build the assembly loaded in tension. Wild to think that there's 33 feet of tubing here, huh? Well, 34 once we get our bar across for our transmission mount. Speaking of transmission mounts, this is another piece that I had bought from Speedway, and like the engine mounts, we're not going to end up using it. However, it was super helpful to have as far as getting everything mocked in here, as far as height of the transmission and all that stuff. So it was handy to have. But we're going to end up building our own from scratch here. And we're going to basically copy this mount. Instead of cutting this apart and cannibalizing this, I don't know, maybe we can use it on a different project or sell her off and try to recoup some money out of it. But We're going to rebuild a mount just like that out of a piece of 2x4 square tubing. And we're going to try and use that offcut from our happy little accident from before. So this is the only piece of 2x4 stock that I've even got on a claim here. And I need all the length here I can get. So in order to center that hole saw up, I'll be over the edge. I just tack welded some nuts on here to keep my hole saw centered up in there. And instead of running like a normal drill bit, like you normally would, I always just pilot drill my holes, and I stick a piece of 1/4 inch round stock in my hole saw arbors, because them brittle drill bits tend to catch and break, and while you're hole sawing, the side of the drill bit is making your hole bigger the whole time, you know, because it's not running perfectly center. So this helps big time, especially in thin sheet metal. And as you can see, I push hole saws pretty hard around here, so through some pretty substantial stuff. And I don't know, this is a Starrett, and I've had this, well, this is part of my dad's stuff. This is probably 30 years old and still kicking. Well, after several failed attempts, we got something we can use here. It's kind of tricky with that compound angle coming up to hit the angle of the frame there and get a nice straight joint. But we got her. We'll slide her in here and show you how it works. Use some, I think this is 3/4 by 188 wall DOM tubing, and sleeved right through the frame there. That way when we clamp the bolts down, it doesn't crush the tube and they're sticking out of the bottom a little ways here. And just like that, she sits. Well, something like that. We got them couple extra curricular bars added in there, and I didn't weld nothing too crazy on the bottom or too horribly out of position, because now comes the moment of truth. We're going to see if this thing will drop back out of here. And here's something kind of cool. These bolts were super tight in this thing before. You know, that stuff pulls and moves when it welds. Once I added these bars, these bolts just drop right in now. So that's pretty neat. So we're going to blast all these bolts out and see if this thing will actually come back out of here. Well, it comes out. I had all the bolts out and I pulled this last big bolt out where it goes in the end of that tube. Went to fire the camera up and it fell out by itself onto the floor. I thought I was going to have to porta power out them rails just a tiny bit to make some clearance, but not necessary. Dragged it out of there. I'll finish welding that out and maybe put some color on it. When we got her back up in there without gouging the paint all up, I did spread the frame just a tiny bit with the porta power just to get it in there so it didn't rub on the way in. And I've just got all the bolts started in here and temporarily installed this old nasty running board mount just to show you how critical this whole operation was here. I'm just going to rest my foot on here and watch that frame mount. I'm not hardly putting any pressure at all on it. And here's what that looks like with everything tightened up. Yep, I'm gonna say it again. Man, I love it when a plan comes together. We've effectively killed all the twisto flex out of this old chassis. Got us a nice trans mount and very effectively shored up these 4-link mounts. Those were highly questionable before. Now they're plumb and square with the chassis, and them ain't going nowhere. And here's a little sneak peek what's to come for the next round of activities here. We've got very little room, so we may as well pack it full of 2-inch 304 stainless, right? Also, if this motor mount setup looks like something that'll help you along on your build, drop a comment down below. Maybe I'll add them to the web store if there's enough demand. And as always, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for following along with the build. And we'll see you on the header video.